And we are live. Greetings, everyone. This is the Liberalists with Jan, and he is with. Introduce yourselves. Tell us more about you.
Hello, everyone. Jan, also known as Jan Mou. I run a podcast called The Symposium. I run various different groups. I'm a identitarian. Some would refer to me as alt-right or fascist or every pejorative under the sun. I am not those things. But yeah, we work with various different groups, such as the Liberalists, as well as identitarian movements like Generation Identity. The group which I primarily belong to and am the vice chair of is the Reality Report, which was founded by Vinnie Sullivan. Unfortunately, he will be unable to join us for this episode, but maybe for the next one. So I'll explain more about myself during the course of this interview, and thanks everyone for watching.
Well, that is I wanted to call this series the Defending Liberty series, is because the question has come up many a time, as Sargon of Akkad has said. It seems like people are under the impression that it's illiberal to defend liberalism, and our assertion is it is not. You have the right to defend your principles. You have the right to defend what you believe in, especially if it is the West, which is the best. And I wanted to get you on to talk about specifically ground activism. And what it is exactly that you've been a part of. What events have you personally partaken of that will help to give the liberalists a grasp on what it's going to take to participate in ground activism?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, when you first initially engage with on-the-ground physical activism, the first thing that you wish to establish is a network of trusted friends, right? Because ultimately, you don't want to go alone. You want to have a little bit of fun. You want to have the social interaction, but you also want to be safe, right? Now, initially, when we started our political activism on the ground, we started off in Speaker's Corner, and we chose that because it's, like one of our fundamental cornerstones of democracy. It's unlike any other place. Genuinely, if you haven't been to Speaker's Corner on a Sunday and you live around London or not too far away from traveling into it, highly encourage everyone to experience it and frequently attend it if you like. So we decided that specifically after what happened with Sargon, aka Carl, at King's College, when a bunch of communists and anarchists known as Antifa raided the place and got them shut down, that, you know what, we saw it happen in America, and we're just not going to let it happen over here. So we said, enough is enough. And I was like, all right, cool. So I know a few people. Vinny knows a lot of people. We're associated with the likes of the Football Lads, the Veterans Against Terrorism, and we expanded on our network. So we got other organizations involved, such as, but not limited to, Generation Identity, and even the Liberalists at this point. And it's all for the sole purpose of practicing a kind of democracy that our forefathers practiced. We don't necessarily have to agree with each other's views, but we have a responsibility to hear those views and challenge them if we disagree with them, and so forth. And we do so in a professional and peaceful manner, and should a physical confrontation occur from an aggressor, everyone has been instructed to behave with restraint and, basically to neutralize conflict rather than make one worse. So in regards to all of the kinds of events that I've been a part of, there are probably too many to list, but I'll give you a few that are very memorable to myself. When Martin Selner was denied access to the UK, right? That means of deplatforming and basically, putting him in a detainment center is a very hostile action. And I frankly think it's something that we ought to be ashamed of. Our government should not silence dissenting opinions in such a manner. The same thing obviously happened to Brittany Pettibone, his girlfriend.
Yes.
Then what happened afterwards was Tommy Robinson, like him or not, he basically went there to read the banned speech. Now, Tommy is a very controversial figure. And where
Yeah.
Tommy goes, either a large group of people follow or a large opposition follow. We decided that we wanted Martin Sellner's speech to be heard, and we came there with big numbers. We came there with, personally, somewhere in the range of 250 of the football lads and so forth. But we
I'll
brought
be honest, I watched that speech, and you had people trying to attack you. Like the mob was like half and half,
yeah,
football lads and people trying to oppose and harass you. I got to see that. That was a sight to see. That
it
that
was
was shocking.
Yeah, it was incredible. I was quite shocked actually. They had sticks, they had bricks, they had bottles. Some of them attacked the police. We basically did everything within our power to neutralize the conflict and prevent it from being as violent as it could have been, and it could have been really awful. I think collectively on that day there was approximately 3,000 people in that Speaker's Corner facility. Vicinity rather. So that's a large amount of people in such a small space anyway. But we've seen
Yeah.
it grow larger and larger. But at that time, that was kind of a milestone. I think most recently we've probably squeezed in about 10,000 there now, which is incredible for the most recent marches and stuff. So I think that was one of the main kind of cornerstone moments of the Speaker's Corner, which changed how Speaker's Corner operated, right? During that
Yeah.
time, it was a very hostile environment. Many people felt unwelcome and threatened by attending it. And because we kept coming to these events, right, not to do trouble, but simply to encourage, everyone to do their speeches and so forth. We supported the MRAs, we supported basically anyone, right?
Yeah.
And now it's safer. People can go there. Obviously, there's still going to be a little bit of conflict every now and then, but the prayer which used to occur there, specifically from the Islamists, no
Yeah.
longer occurs there. Right? I started an email campaign, right, which basically managed to shut that down. Right, and one of the sort of enabler police officers tried to tell them like, oh, if they send an email to the royal parks and request it in writing for them to have permission there, then it will be granted. So my counter email campaign to that was I basically went to every other religious and non-religious organization and I told them, hey, request it in writing for you to have permission. And ultimately I got a confirmation saying that no one will be given written permission to pray in that area. So
Oh, you don't say.
win. So they're very, very butthurt about that entire thing. They've got little mats set up just outside of the Speaker's Corner now. So, uh,
Oh, okay.
so that was quite fun. And I don't know, there's been so many good things happening in Speaker's Corner. I was there when Carl Benjamin did his first Speaker's Corner, and as was Rucka Rucka Ali. I think Jonathan was there on that day, and a handful of other
Yes.
memorable people. That is probably my favorite day in Speaker's Corner, just because the amount of energy, positive vibes and charisma that Rucka Rucka brought, right, was
Hmm.
incredible. Everyone was just cracking jokes, everyone was having fun, and I think Carl was late by about an hour and a half, maybe even two, but no one really cared. It wasn't not like we were there, going, oh, where is he? We're just having fun, and we all took little turns to basically make our own speeches, and it was a really good fun day. And I'm just trying to think, what was the most recent thing that I did there that I can remember? I did a speech after Anne Marie Waters, so we provided her with some security and stuff, and solidarity and all that fun stuff, right? Just like we would anyone.
Yes.
And then Vinny went on to do his speech, and I went on to do my speech, and then we just hanged out for the rest of the day, just having fun. We ended up getting some drinks and kind of having like a picnic and making sure that everyone was safe. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of a gist of my interaction in the Speaker's Corner specifically, right? But if you want
Very
to know
nice.
what I've done bigger than Speaker's Corner, I can tell you. You might be surprised.
Go on. I love surprises, to be perfectly honest. And the reason this is important to hear is there is a stigma with GI, with the football lads and with Tommy, that this accusation of being obviously racist. It's obviously bunk, but surprise me.
Uh,
Tell me what else you've been a part of.
okay, I'm gonna address the racism and anti-Semitism stuff in a moment, right? But before I go into detail, I'm just gonna say there is none, if any at all, right? In my
Mhm.
experience. But all right. So the biggest event organization that I have done thus far was the hashtag Free Tommy campaign. So I was asked by the original organizer of that event to basically help, and I
All
did
right.
90% of that. I dealt with the police liaisons. I dealt with the Westminster City Council. I commissioned music, and we did like all the graphics design and things like that. Many of the things were non-implemented, unfortunately, because other forces got involved and felt more entitled to take control of the event, and
I see.
we we had to sort of graciously but regrettably take a step down. It was a little bit of drama, to say the least, but you know, when 90% of the work was done and then you're told to go away because you're no longer wanted, you're obviously not going to like that very much in either case scenario. So that's an unfortunate thing. However,
Yeah.
I still
I
permitted the
say.
event to go on. I could have withdrawn my support from that application because
Ooh.
obviously, had I removed it, the event would not have gone on. So, I did that in good faith. Um, so that's probably the biggest thing that I was involved in, and that was a good like 30 to 40,000 attendees, which was an incredible atmosphere. And yes, there was a small minority of troublemakers, and I condemn them, and I think it's abhorrent about the things that they did. I do want to use an opportunity to thank the police liaison officers; they were of great help and so forth. Um, in regards to the smear campaigns, in regards to the
So
likes of
hang on. I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. What you
sure.
mean to tell me is that when you are engaging in ground activism and you make a show of force and you connect with the police, you let them know who you are, there is less chance for shenanigans and mishaps and violence and stupidity?
Um, well, it depends on how it's done, basically. So, for instance, if you organize a massive event where you're going to get over 10,000 people coming, right? That
Yeah,
can be seen as a very hostile action. That's the kind of thing that will get people arrested the next morning, right?
of
So what
course.
you want to do is you want to take precautions. The precautions that you take is by informing the local councils of what your intended actions are, that you intend for it to be peaceful. You might want to do some little diagrams or map graphs to indicate where a march is going to start from and where it may end and the duration of the thing and etc. etc. Westminster City Council actually charges £135 per hour for an event to occupy the Whitehall area, just so you know. So
Golly.
yeah, so they actually monetize it as well. So if you want to be hosting a political event in that area, you better be ready to pay up. So, there
Damn.
was a little bit of that going on.
Good heavens.
But yeah, I mean, any other questions in regards to that?
Well, and the question is, since we're all associated with these groups, who some are savory, some are unsavory, some are popular, some are unpopular.
Sure.
That is the real question is what are we fighting for?
Well,
I guess the crux of that issue.
it really that is such a personal question to me because I think the way that I see it is fundamentally we have more to agree upon than we do to disagree upon, right? So
Correct.
fundamentally, I think we're all working to achieve a fundamental, basic, core goal. The utopian dream that everyone may have in their perception may never be achievable because of the differences that we may all have, right?
Correct.
And I think that's just the reality of the situation. But if we can come to a satisfactory close, then I think everyone would be content with that.
Well, that is the idea. That is the idea of being in a democracy, having discussion, and letting the best ideas float to the top, and letting the weak ones fall to the wayside. Um, that's just what a society is, especially if you're in the West.
Yes.
Um, so if you're on the ground, you're getting things done. You've gotten all these aspects put together. You have to draw a map or a diagram to show what's happening when and where.
Yes. Yes, you do. I actually have some, though I'm not sure if I can share them on Google Hangouts at this point. But I also had to produce like a diagram of how the stage area was going to be set up, how many SAA certified security were going to be present, where they would be positioned, and all sorts like that, basically.
Okay. So another obvious question is how to measure success in ground activism.
How to measure success? Well, there are two
Correct.
measures of success. Number one, your
Wonderful.
event being completely successful and having a large quantity of members show up. That's one factor of measuring success. The other
Hmm.
factor of measuring success is lawful, peaceful assembly. If if you have a large quantity of users that sort of say online, "Oh, I'm going to come to this thing," and then they all actually do come, um, however, they're not peaceful and they've caused troubles. They've done criminal damage. They've done, violence and things like that. That to me is a failure because ultimately it
Agreed.
destroys a message. Because people are going to condemn you for the violence of others, and that's going to smear your message. And unfortunately, sometimes you may have a really good message, and certain troublemakers may show up and cause conflict. So one of the best means of resolving such conflict is identifying who the troublemakers are and having your own internal like ground group of users know who the troublemakers are, stay away from them. Better yet, tell them to not attend events if they have the intention of causing such problems. But that it's difficult to do because it's a public event, and sometimes you tell someone to not come and they'll come there regardless. So
Oh, jeez.
yeah, it's not easy.
Okay. Two final questions. How did you meet up with the Liberals, and how did the Liberalists run into you? Who was your point of contact? And how did all of this come to be? How did we form this coalition of sorts?
Sure. Okay. So basically, what happened was it was the Count Dankula thing, right? So Count Dankula was being prosecuted for his Nazi pug salutes, and I was just going like, this is ridiculous. Like this is literally ridiculous. And I
A
was like,
joke. A
yeah,
joke.
literally a joke. So I was like, okay, let's try to reach out to this guy. I was like, you know what, I kind of feel sad. He's a funny guy. He means well. He's generally entertaining. Um, you know, good shit poster, that sort of thing, right? So I had
Yes.
to pitch the idea to like Vinny and some of the others. They're like, who the hell is this guy and why is he significant? And I was just like, well, look, come on. They're basically trying to prosecute a clown, yeah? Are you going to let them throw a
Yes.
clown into a prison? And he was like, yeah, that's pretty fucked up. And I was like, yeah, pretty much. Let's go and
Yeah.
save this guy. So then the event was a little bit all over the place, wasn't it? It was in Scotland and also it was in the Whitehall area, right? So
Correct.
what happened was there was a far threat of, well, I suppose the anarchists. I'm just going to call them Antifa, right? But fundamentally,
Correct.
the groups that cause the biggest problems are Stand Up to Racism, right? SOAS, HS161, Antifa, and Hope Not Hate. They are a mishmash of the same kind of troublemakers. They are a network of the same kind of troublemakers, right? So I'm
But
just
they
going to
sound
refer to them.
so good and virtuous.
I know, right? But they're not. The term gaslighting springs to mind. Um,
Exactly.
yeah. However, so these guys were going around causing all kinds of problems for our guys, right? And they were causing problems for the liberalists and just everyone in general, because to them, anyone slightly to the right of Karl Marx is a fascist, a Nazi, and whatever pejorative. Um, so we were like, okay, we need to send some people over to Scotland to make sure that the peace is kept, and we also need to send some people to London to make sure that the peace is kept. Now, I really wanted to go to Scotland, but that didn't really work out, and I ended up going to the London one. But we did send some of our top boys over to Scotland, and they got to meet Dankula and take some photos afterwards and so forth. And we in London ensured peace as well. And the head of Antifa, right, like one of their top recruiters, his name is Paul Sillett. Paul Sillett is also known as Diane Abbott's bulldog. He's a violent man who used to be a member of National Front, apparently. Um, and
Ah.
this dude managed to actually walk up to quite a few people basically and cause problems. But that's where some of our guys sort of came in and kept the peace to ensure that everyone was protected, and that's why the event was so smooth and violence free. What may or may not have happened behind the scenes, I cannot confirm nor deny. All that I can say is that the far left violence was neutralized that day very efficiently. But yeah, so these kinds of things happen all the time, though. It's just that mainstream media outlets do not report on them. Like, they only report on these big events when it fits their narrative. When a small group of people cause some problems, they start to report on it. But when there is a lawful, peaceful assembly of hundreds or thousands or up to 40,000, they still try to downplay it. They're like, a few hundred people. It's kind of like, no, there were thousands of people there.
Yeah.
So, propaganda machine.
Yeah, you got to fight the propaganda machine, and you need pictures, you need video, you need the common man being represented, and that's kind of what we're doing. We're letting the middle class man, the working man, actually finally have a voice again. So
that's
the
how I
final
met
question here. Oh, go on.
I was just going to say, so that's how I met the Liberalists, but technically I met the Liberalists in two waves, right? Wave number one was actually in between of that big brawl during the Tommy Robinson thing in Speaker's Corner. I bumped into, forget his name now, Ben, I forget his surname. He's got the little ear gauges, like green-colored ones, and briefly had a chat with him, and then at the Count Dankula thing, I met up with Carl and Jonathan, and Jonathan was very forthcoming and friendly and happy with what we had done, and he invited us to the after party, and I'm not going to disclose the location of the after party for security reasons, of course.
Of course.
And we were all there, and we were just interacting with one another, and I explained to both Ben and Jonathan in great detail about what we've been doing and how we feel about, having an open dialogue and keeping the peace and stuff like that. And I basically said to them, hey, look, we also defend the views of identitarian movements like GI. How about one of these days we get you guys to have a chat together? So we hosted our own event in Speaker's Corner. We did our own speech. And we had GI and the Liberalists attend to observe and document that speech and so forth. And, afterwards, we went and had a couple of, friendly drinks and stuff and had a nice chat. And ever since then, we've been proactively trying to support one another. Not necessarily to say we agree 100% with each other's messages. But as I said before, we're still there in solidarity. And if we disagree with a message, well, we start and open that dialogue.
Well, and, the dialogue needs to be had, in order for the ideas to clash and to present themselves. The discussion has to be had. That's what makes us better than our opposition, better than the left, is we have to engage in that discussion. And Jonathan in particular has been a workhorse for ground activism on the UK side for the Liberalists.
He's a great guy.
Nearly every event that we've been able to touch has been because of his work and his labor. So the next question is, without giving too much detail that is compromising and otherwise destructive, what comes next? What is next for you and the crew for promoting and defending liberty?
Well, so here's the interesting thing about it is, so when you start out, you're obviously by yourself, you have your own expenditure, and I'm not going to lie, the whole ground activism thing is an expensive process. Like, it is costly both in time and finances, but it's one which is most certainly necessary, because the way that the current state of affairs is in the UK, it's grave. And for people to sit around idly and do nothing only enables the problem to continue further, only until everyone basically is 100% outraged and says that enough is enough and takes to the streets. We're not going to see very much change. And we also have to do it in a voting sense as well. We have to vote in people that will stand up for our rights and represent our, our will, our sovereign will to be independent and so forth. So that's one of the things. Now, in regards to going forward as a sort of a grassroots movement, we're still trying to find this path, to be honest. We're still doing what we do. We attend all of these different events and stand by with one another, but having some form of financing definitely helps. Now, people like myself and Vinny and a select few of others who I'm not going to name because they wish to have some anonymity, have lost their jobs because of doxing. The Antifas have dedicated, people doxing people simply because of dissenting opinion. Now, this is a very toxic and hateful and underhanded tactic, because very often when they do the doxing process, they also try to threaten people through their children. Like, oh, we know where your children go to school and things like that. That is unforgivable and absolutely abhorrent. Like, how very dare they? So unfortunately, there may be costs. So when you're going into physical activism, it may be prudent to start a new Facebook altogether. Just delete your old one, because getting stuff on lockdown and making it secure and so on is very difficult anyway. And I think the easiest way of going about it is just starting fresh. And the same applies to every other social media outlet. You don't want any of these people to find some personal life with you. Do searches about your own self on search engines and see what may come up. And if something comes up, get it removed as much as you can. I suppose the very last sort of case in point is, as any kind of a grassroots sort of a movement is, inevitably, if you're successful enough, you'll be approached by certain individuals. Some of them may want to fund independent events. Some of them may want to proposition you to, certain deals or whatever, right? The best advice that I'm going to give you is never, ever, ever compromise your ethics for a bit of cash, right? Because the moment that you do something that would undermine the message of your movement, it's game over anyway, right? So don't take that bait, no matter how shiny it may be. And I think that's the best advice that I can give to you guys, really.
Well, that is good advice, and it's something that we will hopefully take to heart. I have to ask, how do you feel about the UKIP?
Oh God. Okay, so I really like UKIP anyway. I think the way that I see it is the two-party system is rigged. Both Labour and both the Conservative Party fail to represent the average, the working class man, even sort of the middle upper class. Like, it's sort of appeasing the non-indigenous people. It's appeasing the sort of champagne socialists, and quite frankly, it's appeasing the mentally deranged. Don't mean to go all right here, but degenerate springs to mind. So it's unfortunate because the Labour Party was basically co-opted a very long time ago, and the name is different to what its intent is. So you can't vote for that because Labour does not represent you. Just gone all robotic on you.
It seems that I have a visitor. But anyways, but no, and that is news to me that you would bring up something like the two-party system, because that's normally an American thing. That's an American problem. You're supposed to have a plurality of parties to be able to fairly compete. So I'm shocked to hear that from a Brit that you have a two-party system.
Well, we fundamentally do have a two-party system, because the way that Labour is going and the way that the Conservatives are going is not in the best interest of the people, and it's certainly not getting any better. Like, they're both, for the most part, pro-EU because it's their gravy train. That's how they make their money. And unfortunately, it's corrupted the moral judgment of the people who should be representing us. But much rather, they are representing their self-interest, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, that is politics.
I have a surprise for you guys.
Oh, I love surprises. You know I love surprises.
So I'm going to keep this as a kind of an exclusive, and I won't go into grave details about it, right?
All right, you guys heard it first. You heard it here first. What is it?
So, so I've been invited to speak at the European Parliament in Brussels recently.
Oh, that is delicious.
That is quite delicious.
That is
So,
very delicious.
so could you imagine myself in Brussels making a speech about the working class, about everything that we've been doing, and what our fundamental message is? Could you imagine the ire and the discontent of all of the globalists and so forth? I think that is going to be a great day. The only problem is I have to apply for a new passport because mine's expired. So I'm going to have a little bit of a waiting period, but that's happening. So watch this space.
Well, hey, best of luck to that. Get that passport taken care of, and on your way there, watch your back and bring your own drinks.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
I someone might poke you with an umbrella. I'm just saying.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, if you don't get the reference, it's a reference to uh, what is that poison that they use?
Oh, cyanide?
No, it's not cyanide. It's a it might be I'm is it cyan? It's not cyanide. It might be mercury, but
All right,
yeah,
but
he
something
would.
that kills
It's something that could like the assassin would put it in the tip of their umbrella and would just jab you real hard with it,
you. Right.
and yeah, you would you die a couple days later.
I see.
So
Duly noted. I'd rather avoid doing that. I kind of
yeah,
like the
don't
whole living thing.
yeah don't get poked with the umbrella.
Sure, noted. But yeah, so that could
So
be a very interesting endeavor because that would be one of the small bits of British representation outside of Britain and actually in Brussels, which has been dictating to us what we can or cannot do.
that is exciting, and it needed to happen. That yours is a voice that certainly needs to be heard, and it is a validation of all the work that has been put forth up until now.
Thank you, thank you. So,
And
where do we go from here?
that well, that is where we're going. We're going straight to the top, and hopefully we'll get to enact the changes that are needful both uh, for both the man and his country.
Absolutely. I mean, the way that I see it is the whole situation with Brexit is the way that the left perceive Brexit is as something of despair and fear, right? It's a kind of perpetual darkness to them that they just despise and they view as like the like doomsday scenario, right? And I think the difference with the perspective is in regards to, the patriots, the ones strong in their conviction, whether they're centrist or right wing or outright nationalists or what have you, right? Is,
Mm-hmm.
we have that conviction that it's a kind of new hope. It's self-determination. It's the sovereign will of the people. And it's an opportunity. It's a chance to basically retake that control and basically carry on our own business and hope for the best, right? Um,
Correct.
so I think obviously we're being very sort of optimistic. They're being very pessimistic. But looking at the things analytically, we regain control of free trade with the entire world, right? Whereas the other option limits our trade to Europe. And to me,
Correct.
I would much rather choose the world over Europe.
So, are you excited that Trump's coming to Britain to? I'm hoping he comes and he makes a fantastic trade deal for y'all to help ease the burden of this Brexit nonsense.
I cannot go into much detail into my knowledge into that event, but I will be somewhat involved, and I can explain after the event later. But I'm very excited about the Sun God Emperor gracing us with his visit.
Yes, yes. But you know what? As soon as you're done with that event, come back on and we'll talk about what it meant and what happened behind the scenes, because that's something that we again need to expose ourselves to so that we ourselves can emulate it in the future. Um,
Well, we work very closely with the Liberalists anyway. So that knowledge is being shared, I assure you. But there are certain things that cannot be said in public.
no, no,
But yeah.
of course.
Hmm. What else was there? There was definitely something else interesting going on, but my mind's kind of lost track of it.
Well,
It's been a
I'll
long
be
day.
honest. I'll be honest. This is a great place to end. This has been a pleasure. This has been a privilege. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, the one of the few men behind the scenes working to ensure that you have freedom again. It's Jan. Thank you so much for coming on and having this interview with us and letting us know what's really going on. And the future's looking brighter every day.
Thank you so much. And I encourage everyone to participate in Speaker's Corner as frequently as you can every Sunday. Do take a moment to check out the different organizations out there that are very active on the streets. And obviously, these are not necessarily all of my own and so forth, but Generation Identity, the Liberalists, the Reality Reports, the Veterans Against Terrorism, the Democratic Football Lads, the Football Lads. Go and have a gander on all of those outlets and see what they're about. Ask your own questions and sort of come to determine that. Actually, there was one last thing that I do want to finish on, and I almost forgot because I feel like this is a very important one, right? So, in regards to
Go
the
for it.
smear campaigns and accusations of racism, in regards to the Football Lads or the Reality Report, or even myself for that matter, right? So, I'm not going to get into too much detail, right? But I've been in a interracial marriage for 12 years before I got a divorce, right? And that was with a Chinese lady, right? And my most recent unfortunate failed romance was with one of mixed heritage. And she was like part Indian and part black and part Caucasian and that sort of stuff, right? So the very like audacity of these smear campaigns just it fails because we're not those types of people, right? So I did want to address that before I forgot, as I just
Well,
remembered.
and that is something that John himself has repeatedly told us with his interactions with you is these people are not racist in any way, shape, or form. So obviously, when the left, the Guardian, the Independent, when they say identitarian and they conflate it with racist, that's clearly wrong. Clearly, there's something more to this word identitarian or identity that they're not getting right, and we need to learn about it ourselves. That's something we
Absolutely.
have to that's something we have to personally come to terms with and what it means. Is it wrong for a Westerner to identify as Western? I don't think so.
The way that I see it is it's okay to be proud of your own people and your own ancestry and the accomplishments of your forefathers, right? That does not necessarily have a synonymous connotation to say that you disrespect or dislike or outright hate the achievements of others and so forth. And I think that's a good and positive sort of message to conclude on. And check me out on basically Symposium. And have a good night, everyone. Take care.
All right. It's been a pleasure having you.